Hi, this is Andre at SimWell. This new feature from Arena 15, the Assign Attribute module, is one of the ones we're the most proud of since we've collaborated closely at SimWell with Rockwell to design that module. And as with most of the new features, they come from customer suggestion. So we really appreciate that, and we thank you for giving us new ideas of improvements for the software. Okay, so we have the model here, which will allow us to use the new and powerful assign attribute module in a few different situations. So this new module will be very useful in agent-based models and all kinds of models that have entities in various locations in the model, and you need sometimes to change the attributes of an entity which is not the active entity. So you're somewhere in the logic and you need to change the value of an entity which you're carrying in a group, which you've picked up, for example, or you need to change the value of an entity in a queue somewhere, or you might even need to change the entity of the value of an entity which is anywhere in the model, but you know its entity number. You can do that also. So I'll just step through the logic here so you see how it works. So if I start, I'll just treat the first entity at time 0, and I will just memorize the entity number of that entity, which is 2 here, in a variable. So we have it for later use. And then we'll just store it in a queue here. So our first entity here is entity number 2, and it has an attribute, number attribute, which is 0 by default. So we'll be changing that value here. I create a second entity at time 1, and then I'll be assigning value 1 to the first entity in the queue here, using our assign attribute module. So if I double click here and I look again in the number, it's now 1. And then I will pick up that same entity. So it's now in a group. For my current active entity, we now have that same entity in the group right here. And I will be setting that value to 2 using the assign attribute module for the second time. So if I look at the attributes here, it's now 2. Then I will drop off the entity in another queue here. And then we'll be using the entity number we've stored here. So entity number 2, it's in the queue here, but we won't be using the queue. We'll use the number just to set the value to 3 now. So if I step again, that same entity has now number 3 here in its value. And finally, you'll see that you can use the assign attribute also to assign a value to the active entity, like with the original assign module. So if I just step again, my active entity number 3 here now has 4 as a value here. So now my model is over. Okay, so now that you saw exactly what the model does, we'll show you a bit how you use it. So the first assign attribute here for the entity in the queue, we've selected entity in queue on top here for the type, and then which queue, which rank in the queue, the attribute we want to change, and the value you want to set it to. So like in a regular assign module, you could add a few assignments here. So you can have as many as you want in here. The second one, same principle, except we chose entity in group. So there were just one entity in our group. We chose to assign it to the first entity we picked up, and then the attribute name and the value again. And here with the entity number, we've selected entity by number on top, the variable here which defines which entity number we want to set, attribute name and value again. And finally, the active entity, you just need the active entity, the attribute name and value. Thank you for watching. SimWell is an Arena Premier partner. We provide consulting, training, coaching, and support. And remember, if you simulate, SimWell.